Hello everybody, and welcome back to another Tradelands video. Today, we will be discussing a lengthy and complex topic, specifically a year's worth of Tradelands trading company drama. Starting in the summer of 2024, I will be accurately timelining the course of trading company relations from summer of 2024 until the present day, which is the summer of 2025. At the start of 2024, a few trading companies already existed. Silent Resentment, led by a player named Benzo Mule, was one such example of a notable trading company that existed by January 2024. Another was Esmio, which was a larger coalition of trade runners. And finally, Brickmans, which was a trade-focused group known for its toxicity. These three groups would set the stage for the coming year. And though these groups would all eventually meet their inevitable end, they laid the foundation and standard for what the modern-day trading company looks like. It is worthy to note that Brickman's trading company was dormant at the time of January 2024 and would not reach peak activity until August of the same year. However, it had existed for a long time before January 2024, and its relevance is important to trading company history. The start of the year was quiet. Not much was going on for the entirety of January, and it wouldn't be until mid-February that any major political changes would come about. On February 10th of 2024, Weymouth Trading Company was formed by POFC Old Man. Weymouth was a quiet company that focused solely on trading, choosing not to interact too much with the other already existing companies at the time. Westwind Trading Company would follow shortly after, established on March 3rd of 2024 by a player named Corvicus. The company would grow to be sizable by the end of the year. These two new trading companies would take time to grow and would not become active on the Tradelands world stage for many months. However, something would happen in August of 2024 in the previously mentioned Silent Resentment that changed the course of Tradelands trading company history forever. Due to poor leadership and overall incompetency, the majority of high-ranking members of Silent Resentment were kicked from the group, and Benzo Mule made the decision to delete the group entirely. The refugees from Silent Resentment formed their own group without Benzo Mule, calling it the Blade of Resentment. Shortly after this secession, another trading company known as Guardians of the Eastern Sea, or GOES for short, was founded by a player named Helix. 1 month later in September, the newly created Blade of Resentment would come together with Weymouth Trading Company and another less active company called Tradelands Trading Company to form the Northern Mercantile Coalition, uniting all three of their groups while maintaining a degree of autonomy. The Guardians of the Eastern Sea opted to ally with the Northern Mercantile Coalition, or NMC, rather than joining it directly. The month of September ends with the creation of another smaller group, called the Catholic Church of the Sinlandian Rite, by a player named Ender. This group didn't do much. However, it was known for hosting masses in a makeshift church house in-game. Ender immediately allied with Westwind Trading Company and effectively became a puppet of it because of that. The creation of all these new trading companies caused the balance of power in the Tradelands unofficial world to shift. The formerly dominating companies such as Esmio, Leviticus Trading Company, and Brickmans all entered a stage of decline, while smaller and newer companies like NMC and Westwind began to grow. Esmio had a brief war with an official pirate crew called Vorith in October, ceasing to exist as an active trading company shortly after. The Esmio-Vorith War put the idea of intercompany war into the heads of other smaller companies, such as Westwind, paving the path for more larger-scale conflicts to take place in the future. Meanwhile, in the Northern Mercantile Coalition, One of the members, named Viking R. Doge, who had been voted in as leader by the rest of the group, was criticized for his poor leadership and choice of alliances. An opposing faction, which he blamed another player named Onyx for the creation for, lobbied for his removal from power. Viking R. Doge, outraged by this, could not take the criticism and decided to leave NMC altogether, claiming they forced his removal. This overall weakened the group, as Viking R. Doge would later flee to Hallandgard, Navy, and NMC's internal factionalism would worsen. Outside of NMC, various new independent groups focused around trade running would form. Some of these groups opted to stay out of the politics shared by some of the larger companies. One notable example is a group known as Yaman's Fish Run Pings, a group that advertised consistent fish cargo trade runs. This group, founded by a player named Yemand6 and some of his friends, did not refer to itself as a trading company and often ignored other groups entirely. The group would gain infamy amongst the official pirate crew realm because of their expensive fish cargo, making them into a valuable target for pirate raids. Now that the foundation had been sufficiently laid, the months of September and November would bring about a period of chaos that would go on to ripple throughout the unofficial side of the community. Brickman's trading company had adopted an aggressive foreign policy, conducting consistent raids against other trading companies and their allies seemingly out of pure ego. This would infuriate the leadership of Westwind Trading Company in particular, as Corvicus and his second-in-command, Pat09, took matters into their own hands. A coalition was formed between Westwind and the Northern Mercantile Coalition to oppose Brickman's and combat their raids to much success. Furthermore, another group would end up joining the war against Brickman's as it progressed, being the La and Mech's Fish Runs, owned by two players named La and Mech. War was declared, and Brickman's was engaged by the coalition at a battle of the fates of sorts, during which they went as far as to hire a mercenary Mars ironclad to support them. Despite their efforts, Brickman's would be unsuccessful in their efforts and would lose the battle against the coalition. This loss sparked a chain reaction within Brickman's, with low morale leading to a secession by most of Brickman's officers and the leader being left without a strong group core to support him. A treaty was signed by both parties, much to the disdain of Brickman, and the war was declared over. By the start of December in that same year, Brickman's was effectively dead. The four-day war, as it was dubbed by Westwind Trading Company, was over. Now, in the ashes of Brickman's, arose a group called ACA, aka a Cut Above Trading Company. This group was founded by one of the former Brickman's officers, named Sufficient Chipmunk III. Many refugees from the original Brickman's group followed him into this company, which provided the former members of Brickman's with a place to communicate and host things like trade runs. This group, founded in December shortly after the end of the Brickman's War, would only exist peacefully for a brief period. Within the same month of its creation, Westwind Trading Company would declare war on ACA and would conduct a dirty war of espionage and harassment against its members. Westwind would go on to leak the personal information of multiple ACA members, most commonly a non-consensual face reveal. This was done through the placement of spies in the ACA Discord server, usually through alt accounts or by getting access through somebody else to see into the ACA server. This dirty war, which Corvicus himself referred to once as the 5-Day War, resulted in many reports and even moderator involvement against Westwind and badly tarnished the reputation of the trading company. A month later, the new year had begun. 2025 brought about a plethora of new opportunities from which different trading companies could take advantage of. For starters, The month of January saw the birth of a group known as the Mazonian Order through a player named Maz the Freak and his friends Ducky and Surplus. Mazonia started simply as a group of friends based on the Nassau faction to conduct trade runs and the occasional raid against piracy. However, by the end of the month, the Mazonian Order had transitioned completely to piracy and had begun to recruit, constructing a solid foundation from which to build off by March later in the year. It wouldn't take long for the Mazonian Order to clash with other groups, as raids against Westwind, despite a shaky alliance that had been forged between Corvicus and Maz, the Freak infuriated the leadership and the members on both sides. The two groups saw a rapid deterioration of relations, resulting in the Mazonian Order coming to the aid of a cut-above trading company against Westwind, in a war dubbed as the Coalition War, in which ACA and the Mazonian Order, with support from pirate crews and other smaller groups, waged war against Westwind. A number of small skirmishes and victories on both sides led to the conflict being inconclusive. However, it did result in the death of a cut-above trading company, as by March of 2025, the high command of ACA had become fragmented by disagreement and annoyance with Westwind's harassment. ACA would go on to disband, leaving the Mazonian Order to deal with Westwind itself. However, nothing would develop further, and the war would be lost to time. A truce would be established between the two at the end of March. It is also important to know that a key factor in ACA's decline was its leader, Sufficient Chipmunk III, being exposed for pedophilia and subsequently banned from the community. At the same time as the ACA versus Westwind Trading Company war drew to its conclusion, political division within the Northern Mercantile Coalition reached its peak. Around March of 2025, Weymouth Trading Company, an integral part of NMC, attempted to secede from the coalition due to poor leadership and mismanagement. However, the members of Weymouth Trading Company ultimately voted to remain within the coalition, as there were fears that leaving would result in inactivity within Weymouth. A close call, however, the whole scandal resulted in low morale amongst the members of NMC, and some even leaving to join the Mazonian Order. Furthermore, a massive scandal between two members of the coalition and an alleged relationship resulted in the loss of even more members and further political destabilization. Around the same time, toxicity and back-and-forth skirmishes between the Mazonian Order and the Northern Mercantile Coalition resulted in a declaration of war by Mazonia on the Northern Mercantile Coalition, a small conflict that once again yielded no real results, however helped to solidify some of Mazonia's members as Mazonians, strengthening the pirate crew. Relations between NMC and Mazonia would continue to worsen in the future as disagreements between both leaderships devolved. Shortly after this, ACA would be declared fully dead, as the server was deleted permanently by its new owner, Finks. Out of the remnants of ACA, Finks would create a new group called Yorktown Trading Company, which was a smaller, less active version of the once flourishing ACA. Nevertheless, this group would exist peacefully for a brief period before collapsing in on itself due to the resignation of most of its members, and would be deleted by April, a month later. Around the same time, the Guardians of the Eastern Seas would enter a period of rapid decline, as the owner, Helix, announced his retirement from the community. Without a clear path of succession, the group was left leaderless and fell out of relevance and into inactivity. The rest of April of 2025 brought about the creation of even more groups to replace those that had died off, the first of which was TCN, or the Continental Navy, which migrated to the Tradelands community from another game. TCN was immediately declared war on by Westwind Trading Company, who began to harass the group by consistently raiding TCN ships and antagonizing TCN members in game chat. Westwind cites the reason for the declaration of war as toxicity, with no further specifications. Furthermore, another newly created group called the Swords of Fortune by a player named Cylinder Zone and some of his friends had its Discord server raided by suspected Westwind members who spammed Nazi pictures after discovering that the owner of the server, Cylinder Zone, was Jewish. The Swords of Fortune disbanded shortly after this, and the Continental Navy was left to fend for itself against the increasingly toxic Westwind Trading Company. A month later, in May of 2025, an older Tradelands group called the Windrock Navy began to revive itself, and after losing a practice skirmish to Westwind Navy, declared war on Westwind and began to fight Westwind ships in public servers. Another new crew, called Pengoland, was founded by a player named Penguiny SWR. Immediately upon its creation, another newer crew with a larger size called the 1st Salem Regiment declared war on Pengoland and summoned its ally Westwind to support it against Penguiny SWR. Both crews began to target Pengoland events and ships in public servers, weakening Westwind's reputation further. As Westwind accumulated different conflicts, a conflict between the Northern Mercantile Coalition and the Mazonian Order was once again on the horizon. Due to incompetent leadership by NMC's consul, King Nubius, and the old leader Viking R. Doge being let back into the Northern Mercantile Coalition after having scammed the Mazonian Order out of 2 million doubloons through the abuse of the Order's loan system, Maz the Freak declared war on the Northern Mercantile Coalition, with Westwind Trading Company choosing to support Mazonia against NMC because of their war against TCN, which NMC was allied to at the time. The war was short, with 2 major battles occurring and multiple Mazonian raids against NMC trade runs taking place. However, the conflict was cut short after an NMC election resulted in the replacement of Nubius with another NMC officer, Rotary Brother. Peace was signed, and Mazonia left the war. However, Westwind remained, as they were determined to crush the new TCN and their ally NMC. At this point, Westwind was at war with 5 different groups: TCN, NMC, Windrock Navy, Pengoland, and the Scurvy Scallywags pirate crew. Dissent within Westwind began to grow, as Westwind officers and many of the lower ranks became dissatisfied with Westwind leadership, harassment tactics, and aggression. This resulted in the birth of a new trading company, called the Royal Tide Company, by a retired Westwind officer named Red Panda. This group grew quickly, as many former Westwind members joined Red Panda and abandoned Pat 09 and Corvicus for the new peaceful alternative. This effectively started a makeshift Westwind civil war, as Pat 09 scrambled to figure out what to do, even proposing that Westwind transition to piracy instead of its longtime trading company status. It didn't help that in the start of July 2025, Westwind lost a skirmish to the Scurvy Scallywags 3-0 and was forced to end its war with the pirate crew, and then another skirmish to Nova Balresca Navy 3-0 as well. The crew was embarrassed and weakened for the first time in its history.